Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery's live stream. I'm Ajahn Sona, and we will get right on with any questions that you wish to ask. Feel free to put them in the comment bar, and let's proceed. Piet. Yeah.
Ajahn, our first question is from the live chat from Alex. Dear Ajahn, it seems like there's two camps in Buddhist meditation. On one side, commentary proponents speak of jhana in terms of nimittas and one-pointed absorption, while sutta proponents argue an open, whole-body jhana, with vitakka vichara meaning thinking and evaluating instead of connecting and sustaining. Do you see the difference in these two meditation systems? What is your opinion?
Yes, I don't know how much, strong difference there is in this. Thinking, vitakka means thinking, and vichara means sustaining. So vitakka, what the types of subjects that are appropriate to the first jhana are reflective types. You can also do non-reflective types of meditation, which are, say, breath meditation is really devoid of thought processes. But there are other things like the 4 elements, dividing the body, the 32 parts of the body. These are basically more discursive kind of subjects. So there are lists of which types of meditation subjects are appropriate to the first jhana. And vitakka also, they describe vitakka as striking and sustaining. But so imagine vitakka as striking a bell. So that you strike the bell, and vichara is it rings, and then the ring fades out, or your mind goes off the subject, and then you return it to the subject. That is to strike the subject and to sustain on the subject. But it doesn't mean that there is no discursive activity. So thinking and striking can be the same thing. You strike the object with your thought process. But it's exclusive, and you're totally engaged in it. I think there are worldly experiences of the first jhana. The first jhana is it's right samadhi, and it's first jhana because it's on a particular spiritual topic or a Dhamma topic. But other people experience these 5 factors of the first jhana in worldly experiences. They also find some subject or object of interest which they strike with their mind, and they sustain attention on it, and piti, or joy, arises. Joy and ease of body arises, and ekaggata, a wholehearted interest, a single subject interest is developed. So the 5 factors of the first jhana can be experienced with worldly states as well. So this is not like completely unknown or outside of human experience unless you're a Dhamma practitioner. But it doesn't qualify as Dhamma because it's not on at the service of investigation leading to liberation. So this is why the 8th factor of the Eightfold Path is called Samma Samadhi. And under the Samma Samadhi are the 4 jhanas. And the first jhana has discursive elements in it. Very, but intense joy can arise and absorption but it's not necessarily on a non-discursive type of subject. Other kinds of meditations lead on to the second, third, and fourth jhana. I should say also that the Abhidhamma divides the first jhana into two jhanas, and the first jhana has vitakka or thinking, or like striking the object with your mind, and the second jhana has vichara, which is sustaining. And so in that system of presentation, there are 5 jhanas. The first jhana is divided into 2 vitakka. So the first jhana has these components: vitakka, which means thinking, joy, piti, sukha, bodily pleasure, ekaggata, single focus. And the second jhana has vichara, which means sustained attention on something, and then piti, sukha, and ekaggata. So those 4 factors. So it's kind of how you want to see it. I mean, they make their best attempt to explain it, but I don't think we should make it too outside of, experience. People regularly report, deep, delicious joy in things they're interested in. So the characteristic of joy arising is because you have focus, you're completely absorbed and interested in a subject, some object which grabs your attention. Joy arises. And of course, when the joy arises, the body is also goes into the background or feels bliss in the body, and you're completely absorbed on the experience. This is commonly reported in worldly experiences. So the jhana factors are there in worldly experiences. They're just not what we're talking about, the jhanas we're talking about. The higher jhanas, second, third, and fourth jhana, are rarely, if ever, experienced with worldly subjects. So it requires the shutting down of discursive activity, and it's non-reflective. There is awareness in them, though, and you can recall them. So obviously, how do we know the factors that make up the second, third, and fourth jhana? We recall them. After leaving those, we can articulate what the experience was about. So there's certainly awareness in them. And so this is how we would approach this, as sometimes there's just a confusion of language about what is meant by vitakka and vichara. So this is what I use for getting at the meaning of what the Buddha said. I look at the similes that the Buddha gave. And so there are similes for the jhanas, which are primarily to do with the mind as water and types of water. You should watch my 6 talks on jhana, which I gave as a retreat about 3 years ago. And there we go into these similes, and we illustrate the similes. We got into a great deal of trouble to make this understandable, and not just playing around with Pali words and the Sanskrit roots of them or etymologies, etc. These are not the best way to come to the meaning of what the Buddha was aiming at. One of the best ways is to, first, context. What is the context? And then secondly, what he used again and again and again are similes. It's like this. A person straightens out their mind. As a farmer makes a ditch which transports water to a field. So one channels the mind, you know. The untrained mind flops on the bank like a fish out of water. So if you've seen a fish out of water, then you get that idea. You see simile. It's similar to this. So that's how you get at the meaning of these. You look in the suttas, instead of the commentaries, look in the suttas and look for the similes and see if he presents a picture to you. The simile is like a picture with 1,000 words. I won't spend too much time on this. But I could, of course, I could spend 6 hours on this, but let's go on to the next question.
Next question is from Upasaka Gordon from Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. I have read that lay people should address ordained monks with less than 10 years as, quote, venerable, and more than 10 years ordained as, quote, Ajahn. Would it be an insult to call a greater than 10 years ordained monk as venerable, particularly if accidental? Also, how does the honorific, quote, bhikkhu fit into this, as in bhikkhu bodhi or Thanissaro bhikkhu?
There's a variety of possibilities here. If you're not from a specific culture, if you're not a long-time Buddhist, it's not surprising that you'll be fumbling around with these various titles that monks have. In each culture, like the Sri Lankan culture, the Thai, the Burmese, they have, half a dozen words or more for monks. And they have elaborate titles. It's really quite a vocabulary. Even the types of words they use for when a monk is sleeping or eating or bathing, it's a different word than when a layperson is sleeping, eating, or bathing in Thai. So you can't be expected to know these things unless you're raised within the culture. Ajahn is the Thai version of Acharya, which means teacher. And a monk of less than 10 years, might be a teacher. They might be teaching lay people. They might even be a teacher to another monk, but they can't be officially give ordination to a monk. You need 10 years in the robes. Then you're called a Thera, or an elder. So usually in Thailand, a lot of monks are addressed as Ajahn. If there's any doubt, they just might say Ajahn, teacher. But theoretically, within your within the sangha, within the monks, you kind of know who's senior enough to be addressed as Ajahn, which would be 10 years or more. But as for lay people, it's not really it's not a discourtesy to address any monk as Ajahn, or as venerable, or as bhikkhu. So all monks are bhikkhus. We're in fact not monks. Monks is a borrowed word from the Latin, perhaps, monachos. Meaning a sort of solitary person. We're just borrowing it because we're approximately something like what we call in the West a monk. But bhikkhu is the proper term. We're all bhikkhus. So bhikkhu bodhi, bhikkhu Sona. You can call me bhikkhu Sona as well, or Sona bhikkhu. Doesn't matter which order. And so these are all terms that you can use without worrying too much about it. The monk is not going to be offended in any way by you. The bhikkhu is not going to be offended by you in any way. There's a funny story. My ordaining teacher is Bhante Gunaratana. Oh, we forgot to mention Bhante. So the Bhante is the Pali term which they actually used at the time of the Buddha for somebody who's senior to you. So if I'm addressing a monk who's senior to me, I would call them Bhante. If I'm addressing a monk who's junior to me, I might call him Avuso, which is kind of like brother. But anyway, Bhante Gunaratana was the first, he was at the first Theravada monastery in North America in Washington, D.C. He was the second abbot there, and I think he came in 1966 or something like that, 67 perhaps. And the Americans are completely unfamiliar with this, but the 60s were quite the decade for spiritual searching, and a lot of the baby boomers were coming and showing up at Buddhist temples, and they didn't know how to address him. Mr. Monk. They didn't know how to. So they decided, the Sri Lankan monks decided that instead of Bhante, that you could call us venerable, which is a very British kind of term, venerable. And the young Americans didn't use this word. They didn't know what it was. So somebody said, after addressing him as vulnerable, quite a few times, they asked, "What is it you're vulnerable to?" So the Sri Lankan monks gave up on using the word venerable. These American kids, they don't know what. So they said they went back to Bhante. Yeah. In the case of Bhante Gunaratana, they couldn't handle the Gunaratana either. So his name became abbreviated to Bhante G. So we're going through all these cultural changes, people getting familiar with Buddhist monks and how to address us. Of course, they get mixed up with the Dalai Lama, or am I a Lama, or a Bhikkhu, or what, so, or a Roshi, am I a Zen master? So it'll be a while before everybody sorts all these things out. But in the meantime, all you got to have is a good heart, and that's everybody will understand. Okay, let's go on.
Next question's from the live chat from Jeff in Montreal. Ajahn, many Buddhists profess a belief in rebirth after physical death. The Buddha states to not believe, but instead to investigate. How can one know about rebirth after death, since it can only be experienced when one has died?
Well, you can't know. You can't know that at death there is no further life. You couldn't know that. How could you know that? By revelation, by any means, and if you don't have any kind of special capacity, you wouldn't know about future rebirth. By the way, so in Buddhism, one of the things that people are not generally curious about is the afterlife. And that is because, from a Buddhist point of view, this is the afterlife. You are now in the afterlife, the one after the one you just had. So in Buddhism, there's another way to understand about what happens at death is by memory, remembering what happened before this birth, before this life. In Christianity, there's no idea of a previous life. So they only have the idea of they will not accept the idea of a previous life. So they only have the idea of a next life, and that could only be experienced through, some sort of revelation or etc. So Buddhism has a different approach to it. Secondly, as far as investigation, the Buddha does encourage you to investigate. It doesn't mean that you can't make commitments beforehand. You don't claim to know about the next life or what's going to happen to you when you die, unless you actually do know that. But there's no obligation to claim or say, I believe this. However, there's no problem having a conviction about it, saying, I'm putting all my chips on this number, that there is a further, something further beyond this life, and that it's related in some ways to the moral dimensions of this life and the development of my mind in this life, I'm going to lay my chips on that number. And the Buddha talks about this, and there is a sutta called the Teachings to the Kalamas, Kalama, Kalama Sutta, in which he discusses this. A group of villagers called the Kalamas ask him, how should we choose our religions? Because there are a lot of different teachings about this, various theories about what happens. So he goes through it, and when it comes to the idea of another life, he just says there's two possibilities. One is there isn't one, and the other one is there is one. Now, if you gamble that there isn't one, there's only one thing you can ever find out about that you're wrong. Because if there isn't one, you will never find out you were right. You get it? Because when you die, you won't find out that you don't exist. The only possible thing you could find out is that you do exist. So you can only, from that point of view, this is directly from the Buddha. This is, by the way, some of you may think this is similar to something called Pascal's wager. Pascal was a fellow from the 17th century who put this form of a bet in terms of the existence of God. But this is not Pascal's wager because it's nothing to do with God. And besides this, it's 22 centuries before Pascal. It's just logic. So if you bet heavily that when you die, there's no existence, you can't directly find that out. You can never confirm that. But you can only find out you're wrong. If you bet heavily that there is a further existence, you can only find out one thing. And ladies and gentlemen, what is that one thing? That you were right. You can't find out you were wrong about that, because you would be floating around saying, see, I don't exist. You can never say, I don't exist. So he says, if you don't know about this, if you have no direct knowledge about this, and you don't have a faith in this, then here's the gamble that you make. And you're free to make this gamble. The Buddha encourages you to make the gamble based on this logic and bet heavily on existence, because you can never find out you were wrong. You can only find out you were right. But if you gamble heavily on non-existence, you can only find out you were wrong. You can never find out that you were right. So that's a little excerpt from the Kalama Sutta. That's, if you want to look it up, type that into Google, or go to the Anguttara Nikaya, the numbered sayings, and it's in the threes, amongst the threes. Yes. Next question, Pia.
Ajahn, the next question is from Theodore from the live chat. Dear Ajahn, I am ready to renounce and become a monk, but cannot because I have a dog, and there would be no one to care for her if I left. Is this a crazy reason to delay entering the robes?
Well, I had that similar situation myself. I had this dog, and I wanted to go off to this temple. And I had to leave a lot of things behind. I had a house and a career, and I was married and all kinds of stuff. And those things are easy to renounce. Why is a dog hard to renounce? Because it can't take care of itself. It's totally dependent on you. So there is a choice. My dog, by the way, weirdly ran away, and it just disappeared in the night, and I couldn't find it. I searched. I made a darn good. I phoned all the pounds, the SPCA, and everything. No. And I was free to go off and be. I'm like, so. I suggest that you find a good home for it, that you find somebody that you will be a concerned caregiver for your dog. Because if you just hand it over to the pound, once the date of keeping it expires, they might just, put it to sleep, or whatever the euphemism they have these days about how they dispose of animals. So it's you can't just let it wander the streets. You need to find it a good home, and then away you go, off to the robes.
Next question is from Anju in London, England. What must one do to be born again in the human realm and meet with the Buddha's teachings, specifically if one does not attain stream entry before death in this life?
To give yourself the best possibility is simply engage, bathe in Dhamma all the time, and take refuge in the three jewels: the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha. So maybe on a daily basis, you go for refuge every day. You say, I go for refuge to the Buddha. I go for refuge to the Dhamma. I go for refuge to the Sangha. You maybe have a Buddha image in your house. You rehearse the Dhamma, listen to the monks, listen to Dhamma talks, steep in that, and then your whole mind is inclined to find that in the next life, and many lives. It will gravitate back to that which and you will recognize it. You'll have amnesia. Most people are born with amnesia due to the traumatic experience of dying, being in the womb for 9 months, being a helpless baby for several years before you get your language thing together. So you've got some years of sort of traumatic experience, which results in confusion and amnesia. But notice people's inclinations, even from very young. One 3-year-old will be very interested in music. The other will be interested in banging on things, putting things together. The other one will be one who draws and paints. The other one runs and jumps. One is interested in language, another in mathematics. One is very compassionate. The other one has no social skills. So you'll see this emerging. And in the West, we interpret this as either just random chance or genetic influence or environmental influence. But from a Buddhist point of view, these are past life personality developments. So this is all you do. Just cultivate whatever you want in the next life. You cultivate it in this life. Okay, Pia, next question.
Next question is from Pragan in Massachusetts, United States, from the live chat. Dear Ajahn, is metta also considered a dana for the 10 perfections as dana of vibrations?
Yeah, I will explain that to the audience because it may be obscure. He's asking, what's his name?
Pragan?
Pragan. Maybe, I don't know whether man, woman, whatever. Pragan is asking, is loving kindness a form of generosity? And is the generosity as the vibration, your good vibrations of loving kindness, is it going towards people? Are you giving them this good vibration? So is it a kind of generosity? So the word dana, D-A-N-A, is the Buddhist word for generosity. So giving food, giving shelter, giving medicines, giving Dhamma. So I am performing a dana, generosity. I am giving out Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha. And so there is a positive result from this for me, actually, because I am teaching Dhamma. I get benefits from this. If I give food, even to feed a bird or something like this, then I get a lot of benefits from that. I benefit from generosity of material things and of ideas, intellectual things, and of emotional things. And so loving kindness radiated outward has the highest return on many, many benefits come back to the giver of loving kindness. And in fact, there's an immediate effect. Loving kindness is a deeply rich and beautiful experience. So the one who radiates it instantly receives benefits from this. One who receives it, who can sense it and receives it, also immediately gets benefits from this. So there's a transactional form of generosity. One who cannot receive the loving kindness does not benefit from it. But the one who gives the loving kindness always benefits from it. So yes, it's a form of generosity, a vibrational generosity. Yeah.
Next question's from the live chat as well, from Gatikara the engineer. Most Venerable Sir, is there a difference in the terms samadhi and jhana?
Samadhi is the general term for a variety of mental activities, and jhana is a specific term. And each jhana, like there are 4 jhanas, and or sometimes listed as 5 jhanas, and they all are collected under the title of samadhi. Samadhi and samatha. So yes, they're basically the same thing. Yeah.
Next question is from Upasaka Charles in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, United States. Dear Ajahn Sona, within samsara there is such beauty, including nature, music, art, and people. The fact of their impermanence only increases their beauty. Yet I feel at times that I should not allow myself to engage in such beauty, since the goal of my practice is to escape samsara. How is beauty to be skillfully dealt with?
Yeah, the beauty is to be seen, so that the beautiful should be seen with wise attention. There's a Pali word for this, yoniso manasikara. Yoniso is like the roots of things, or the source of things. And manasikara is mind doings, mental activities that go to the source of things. So wise attention to the beautiful means that you do not generate attachment to it. And wise attention to the ugly, or the repulsive, or the negative, is you do not generate negative, like ill will towards that. So you see both the beautiful and the ugly with wise attention, and wise attention means that you do not become attached to the beautiful or to the ugly. Attachment, by the way, is not, you usually think of it as clinging, but rejecting is a form of attachment. Like aversion to something is a form of attachment. And desire is also a form of attachment. So the first 2 hindrances are desire and aversion. So they're both attachments. Meaning that it's just like you got a string tied on your wrist to the object, and every time the object moves, you're dragged along with it. So detachment means you cut the string between you and the object. You are now unmoved by the object. You are not moved by it because you are not connected to it. So this is the ultimate aim of the Dhamma, is to become free or detached, like no chains between you and the world. The world is sights and sounds, smells, tastes, touches, ideas, and that's how you experience people and the nature and all things through the senses and through your memory, imagination, and thought process. That's how you experience the world. And if the world can influence your moods, then you're not free. So if somebody says an insult to you and you become depressed about that, then you're attached. They've got you by a rope. But what if you cut the rope? Then they have no power over you. You're free. So your emotions are self-generated. Your emotions are not dictated by the world or the circumstances around you at all. You're independent of that. So you're generating what types of emotions? The enlightened person generates the emotion of joy, ease, or serenity. They are generating that in the midst of some tragedies and comedies, good fortune, bad fortune, praise and blame, success and failure. They're generating joy and serenity. So when you fail, the enlightened person is joyful. And when they succeed, they're joyful or serene. So somebody praises them, they're joyful and serene. Somebody blames them, they're joyful and serene. Because their emotions are not determined by outward circumstances or anybody else's ideas or opinions. So this is the idea here. Yeah.
Next question is from Ruth from the live chat. What advice would you give a parent who suspects their child is being bullied?
Well, you need to do whatever you can to remove them from the situation, but sometimes children run into this, so you have to spend a good deal of time kind of explaining that. And, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Look at these poems. These are straight from the Buddha. You explain to them, that boy that called you that name, he is ignorant. He doesn't know. He doesn't understand. That poor boy, he has not got proper upbringing like you do, dear. You know not to call people names. You know not to make fun of people. He doesn't know that. She doesn't know that. That poor child. How should you feel about that? Well, they're really not talking to you. Do you know that? They're trying to get power themselves because they're weak. So you explain this to the child, and because you're an adult, they tend to believe you, and it's very empowering. It's almost magic. You have to be careful what you tell a child because they really just believe it. And if you tell them that people who make fun of people and bully people and everything are weak and to be pitied, and that you're strong and you don't do that, others will do that, but you will not, because that's not good, that's low, and that is not what good people do. Then they get that. They can be strengthened that way.
Next question is also from the live chat from Diana. Please explain this phrase. A noble friend is the whole of the spiritual life. It makes me feel dependent.
Yeah, it's a very famous dialogue with the Buddha's attendant, Ananda. Venerable Ananda asked the Buddha, he was exulting in the company of the Buddha, and he said, to the Buddha, I think a wise friend, a spiritual friend, is half of the holy life. And the Buddha said something startling. He said, No, Ananda, a wise, a beautiful friend is the whole of the holy life. And now he said that as a jarring, what seemed to be at first a jarring deviation from his teachings, that you are an island unto yourself, you are a lamp unto yourself, no one else can enlighten you, you enlighten yourself. But he's what he said, he continues the conversation. So that phrase, a spiritual friend is the whole of the holy life, is only part of that dialogue. So you need to know the whole dialogue. And the rest of the dialogue, the Buddha goes on to show that what happens is you emulate a spiritual friend until you get the qualities of that spiritual friend, and then you are now identical in qualities with that spiritual friend. So the spiritual friend ultimately turns out not to be another person, but the spiritual qualities of that people have. And then you have those spiritual qualities. Now you have completed the path. So the spiritual qualities are the path. The Buddha is one. Somebody comes to see the Buddha and to admire the Buddha. And the Buddha says, you cannot see the Buddha, but if you see Dhamma, then you see the Buddha. So the Buddha is not that body walking around, but the Dhamma that the Buddha is knowing and expressing. So one who sees Dhamma sees the Buddha. If you see Dhamma, then you see your spiritual friend, because they're only a truly a beautiful spiritual friend if they have seen Dhamma. And you are not, it's not the person that is the beauty. Their beauty is not in their face or their hair or something like this. It's in their Dhamma. So that's the lesson in this little story. Yeah.
Next question is from Upasika Jagaro in Kamloops, British Columbia, Canada. Dear Longpo Sona, can you provide me with a framework with an appropriate methodology to study the suttas? I find myself jumping around the various texts.
That's not a bad way to do things. How do you know ahead of time what you're going to benefit from? So you're a bright fellow. You've heard lots of Dhamma, and so reading various suttas is fine. The way the Pali Canon is organized is, the longer length sayings, the Digha Nikaya is first, and it's a lot of cosmology in there. And then the middle length sayings, there's a lot of meditative Dhamma stuff in moderate length forms. And then the connected sayings they're just groups of themes. And then the numbered sayings are just organized by number. And then there's the Khuddaka Nikaya, which is it's a collection including products of monks as well and so forth. All of them are just beautiful. You never know where you're going to come across some gold. You're gold mining. Feel free to dig in, anywhere. You can find gold anywhere in there. Yeah.
Next question is from the live chat from Andy. Do you believe that the Buddha was infallible? Could corrections or skillful additions to the Dharma have occurred after his death?
The Buddha was not omniscient. There's a lot of discussion about this, and in Buddhist cultures, the Buddha himself had a dialogue with a rival leader, the Jain leader, who claimed omniscience, claimed to know everything. The Buddha said, well, you can't know everything, especially because there's an infinite number of things going on at once, so you can't obviously know everything at once. But he said he could know certain things in a very clearly and very certainly. He had knowledge, and this is about Dhamma primarily. So I would just stick with that idea of his knowledge of Dhamma. He didn't make mistakes, from his point of view, he didn't make mistakes in regarding the teachings. There are various schools of Buddhism. The Theravada regards the Pali Canon as the kind of the word of the historical Buddha. And there are other schools in the Mahayana where sutras appear much later that are attributed to the Buddha, but that were after the death of the Buddha, after the time of the Buddha, and really, we would say they're the products of monks' imaginations, pious fabrications. And so there's a whole school that says that the historical Buddha didn't reveal his higher teachings to the people at the time because they couldn't understand it. And only later on the higher teachings would be revealed to those more able to accept them. So that is one of the basis of some of the Mahayana sutras. The Theravada does not accept that. They don't think that's what the Buddhists intended in any way, and they, especially in the early times, they regarded that contrary idea as a heresy. And to this day, there are people where they definitely choose their schools, and some attempt to reconcile the schools. There's the Mahayana. It means the great vehicle. Maha means great. Yana means vehicle, and they refer to the another school called the Hinayana, Hina Yana, the inferior vehicle. You won't find the either term in the early teachings. This is obviously a later school kind of thing. The Hinayana may refer to the Theravada in some ways. Some would say that no, it's kind of small-viewed monks or something like that. And then there are people who try to reconcile these two schools by saying, well, it's all Hahayana. It's don't take it too seriously, etc. But we don't. Most one school or another. Although most monks, let me repeat that. Most monks don't accidentally follow a school. So it's they make a choice, but in cultures where it's only in modern times that we've had the different schools have had full access to other teachings, the other schools' teachings. Before, you used to have to walk on, 200 miles through the mountains and then you encounter a different school of Buddhism, which you had never heard of. Now, you just press a button, Google, and you can get zapped with all kinds of information on all different schools. So more and more, especially if you're from a non-Buddhist culture, you have to select from the schools. You have to decide which ones, because they have very strong differences in them. I myself I started with the Tibetan school, went to a Korean Zen school, and then chose the Theravada. And then within the Theravada, I chose primarily the forest tradition. And I also, read the suttas, and I'm a bit scholarly as well. So that's a choice, and it's not just an accident. I'm not just accidentally not of the Mahayana school. I'm very deliberately, clearly, and committed to the Theravada school, the Pali Canon, and not at all committed to in the Mahayana schools or the sutras at all. And it's not an accidental choice. It's a very deliberate choice, etc. So these are the kind of choices that one has to make in this life.
Our next question is from the live chat from Billy. Zen enthusiast here. Does AI have Buddha nature? I'm very interested in AI as it relates to spirituality right now.
I would say no one has Buddha nature. First of all, you're from a school. If you're from the Zen school, that's a particular advocacy within the Mahayana that there is such a thing as Buddha nature. I don't think the Buddha ever said that. There is no intrinsic nature. There is only anatta, or no self. There is no self, which there is no buried nature. Beings, so the Mahayana, the Zen is a Mahayana school, and it's a strong emphasis on bodhisattva ideas as well. And there is a vow that you take, all beings I vow to liberate, endless blind passions I vow to uproot, I vow to save all beings, etc. So this idea of that the Buddha ever thought it was possible to save all beings is a characteristic of the Mahayana school. It's not characteristic of the the Theravada or the historical Buddha. The Buddha said, he was asked, how many will be enlightened? He said, I don't say how many, he makes no prediction whatsoever that all beings will ever escape samsara. I would say it's highly unlikely, because samsara is theoretically beginningless. If it's been going on from beginningless time, it's not and there are still incalculable numbers of beings in it. It's not likely that there's any reality that it will end. There is no intrinsic movement towards nibbana or nirvana. If a being comes across the path and follows it, they may indeed attain nibbana, come to the end of it, but there's no sort of underlying reason why that would happen, including such a thing as Buddha nature. So I would certainly say AI does not have Buddha nature, but I would also include all beings as none of them have Buddha nature until they're a Buddha. Then you got Buddha nature.
Our next question is from Theo in Markham, Ontario, Canada. I have been struggling to find proof of something. Hopefully you can shed light on it. Is the Pure Land of Amitabha taught by the Buddha, or is this something that's been made up?
Well, you don't find it taught by the Buddha, the Theravada. The Buddha of the Pali Canon does not. There's no mention of Amitabha, or these are later Pure Land developments. They seem to develop in perhaps later in India, but primarily are developed very much in China, and they go to Korea and Japan, Vietnam, Mahayana countries particularly. And so it strikes most people in the West, if you're a sort of a scholar of Buddhism, but you're familiar with Christianity, that it starts to sound very very Christian. This Amitabha is a kind of a savior, bodhisattva savior, who has some sort of power in bringing you into the Pure Land. There's several versions of this. One is if you have faith, it's just by faith alone. So it's very Protestant, Lutheran kind of idea. Faith alone, works are not necessary. Faith alone is the faith in Jesus. So faith in the Amitabha. And your virtue may be very sullied, very problematic, but you're going to be saved by Amitabha because of faith. In Japan, there is a sect, Nichiren sect, that insists that even trying to be good means that you don't have faith. So the bad man who has faith is going to be saved. And what is faith? You just need to say the word once, Anyway, it seems, 180 degrees off the teachings of the Buddha, where each person is responsible for their actions and the resultants of their actions. And nobody can, interfere with that or transfer their merits to you or relieve you of responsibility of your decisions. So it's a very different school. I can understand its development because, a compassionate monk, for instance, might despair of very few people are going to systematically sit down and meditate. If you're a Chinese peasant with 14 children, rice farmer, and there's wars going on and you're chaos and disease, and to talk about meditation is just absurd. They don't have time in this life. And what's going to happen to them at the end of it? They're just sweltering under the difficulties of life. And so wouldn't it be nice if some being could intervene with this? I can see how this develops. And then that person, all you got to just say once the name of Amitabha, or just have faith in that, and then everything will be all right. So it's compassionate, but is it true? Is it true? Well, it's the same idea with Jesus. You got to have Jesus as your personal savior, and then I think everything will be all right. Your sins are all forgiven, etc. I can understand the compassion behind that, but is it true? Not from the historical teachings of the Buddha. No, it's not true. Yeah. Okay. I think last question. Yeah.
Our final question today is from the live chat from Aaron. Dear Ajahn, is it possible to not have fruition of the first path even 29 years after Nibbana cessation? Is it possible one could just not remember the fruition, having no understanding of the process?
Well, fruition, okay, we got to go into this. Path and fruit. So this is, there are two parts to each stage of enlightenment. There are 4 stages of enlightenment. It's a realization. So something, the bell rings, the light goes on about the nature of anicca or impermanence, etc. You understand the Dhamma. Clearly, you see it. And then your life, the resultant of that is the fruition of that. And that is said to proceed, in the next moment. Usually, like the classic description is that it's just one moment, thought moment apart. It may not be that close together, but it's soon. And if you've sort of had a flash of light 29 years ago, and nothing has happened since, it hasn't altered your life, and is not playing out vividly in your life, hasn't transformed you, then it wasn't a flash of insight to begin with. Yeah. Now, let us mention that this is the end of our live streams for the summer. What will take its place are a series of talks I gave during a retreat called the 37 Requisites of Enlightenment, the 37 Factors of Enlightenment. These are 12 talks, and they will be released once a week. I think the release time will probably be on Saturdays. We're not too sure. But just go to Ajahn Sona's YouTube channel, and there will be And of course, if you're subscribed, there'll be a little ding and you will be told, oh, there's a new talk by Ajahn Sona. These ones were given to the retreatants that arrived here in May. It was a two-week retreat. I gave a talk virtually every night. And they are being nicely edited. They were a very nice setting, slightly different than this live stream setting. But we will give you a break from listening to live stream questions and answers for 12 weeks. And then we will resume in the fall when our series of 12 talks have been released. So I hope you tune in for that. The nice thing about those kind of talks is it's well edited. I tend not to stutter and cough throughout them not because I don't stutter and talk, but cough, but because that's all edited out. So you have some mercy from my stuttering and coughing. Okay, so that's all for today.